Hi, in this lecture, you will learn how to use the table functions with two different types of it: regular table functions and pipeline table functions. First, let's start with what are the table functions. Table functions are the functions that return collections of rows that can be queried like a regular database table. The collection of rows means either a nested table or a V-array. That means table functions are the functions that return a nested table or a V-array. And we can query from these functions just like a table. Now, between the regular and pipeline table functions, there is only one but efficient difference in functionality. A regular table function creates the entire collection in the memory and returns it after completing the creation. But this is a problem sometimes because the collection may have a large amount of data and this may fill your entire PGA. So you may have some problems about that. Besides, even if you want the first 5 rows of the collection, you will need to wait for the function to complete the entire collection. So this is also a problem. To avoid these problems, we can use the pipeline table functions. Instead of creating the entire collection, pipeline functions return each row as soon as it is created, but continues returning rows until it completes creating the entire collection. Because of that, you will not have any memory problem, or you will not wait for the functions to create the whole collection. So it will be faster and will need so less memory. So this property can be used in data warehousing ETL operations to increase the performance and reducing the data loads. So which one to choose? If your function returns a collection that has a small amount of data in it, you can use a regular table function. But if the collection will have a large amount of data, you need to use the pipeline table functions. Great, so let's start with our examples and see how to use these functions. Alright, we will first start with the regular table functions. Actually, it is called as table functions, but do not confuse about that. There are not so many functions that called as table functions. Actually, there is no function like that. If you create a function that returns a collection of data, it is called as a table function. You will understand better when you see the examples. Now, to have a table function, you need to have an object type that you can use with the nested table or the V-array. Now, let's assume that we have a function that returns the dates and the numbers that show which number of day it is. For example, February 5 is the 36th day of the year. Then we will use that as a table. So let's start with creating our type then. I simply write create type t_days as object. vDate is date and vday number is int, for example. Now let's create it. But we have a typo here, let's correct it and run our code. Great, now we have our object type. We will use it like a record. Now we need to create a type for the nested table. We created this object type to use in the nested table type. Actually, we could use a V-array type, but since our table will have an indefinite number of rows, we need to use a nested table. Okay, now let's create our nested table type then. We write create type t_days tab, for example, is table of t_days. Great, now let's create our type then. Alright, now we can use that type as a return type of our function. So now it's time to create our function then. Our function will get two parameters: the start date and the day number. This function will fill a nested table starting from this start date and add days as much as the day number parameter. With this way, I mean with returning a nested table type value, we will be able to use this function like a table. So let's create it then. Create or replace function fGetDays, for example. The first parameter is pStartDate, its date, and the second parameter is pDayNumber. And its type is int, for example. And return t_days tab is. As you can see, we return our nested table type, tDays tab. Now we need to create a nested table of that type. We know how to do that in our previous lectures. So I simply write v_days tDays tab is equal to tDays tab in parentheses and our begin keyword. Now, in here, we will fill our nested table. We will iterate as many times as the pDayNumber parameter. So let's write it. For I in 1.pDayNumber. Let me copy that. And our loop keyword. Now, we will extend our table to be able to add a row in it. So I write vdays.extend. Now we will add the values. To do that, we will use the object type. Now the first variable is the date. To have this variable, we will add the variable I to the start date. With this way, we will have an increasing date column. So I write vdays and I is equal to t_days, and in the parameters I copy the p start date and paste in here and add plus I. The second column of that nested table is the day of the year. Actually, Oracle offers us a very easy way to get that value. We simply use the toChar function with 3D letters. Then we will convert it to a number again. So let's see how to do that then. I simply write toNumber and inside parentheses toChar, and again inside parentheses pStartDate plus I, and inside of the single quotes I write 3D letters and our parentheses again. And let's end our loop. Now we will return the nested table that we have prepared. I simply write return v_days and our end keyword. Now let's create our function. Great, our function is ready to use. Since this is a table function, we can query it like a table, but with one difference. We need to use the table operator to do that. Let me show you. Let's open up a new worksheet. Select all the columns from table, and inside of parentheses I write fGetDays and our parameters, sysdate, and let's say 50. As you can see, we used our function in the area that we write our tables normally. But to define that this is a table function, we type the table operator and our function is written inside of the parentheses. Now let's run it and see if it works. As you can see, we query it from our function just like a table. When we call our function with this way, our nested table is filled and returned to our select query. Then the result is printed on the screen. Now, I will show you one more thing. Starting from the database version 12.2, you don't need to write the table operator. It's enough to write the function. But be aware, if we use it with 12.1 or an earlier version, you need to write table operator in any cases. Since I have the version 12.2 now, I can delete the table text. Now let's run it again. As you can see, it works without any error. Besides, as you could see, there is no performance problem. But what if we need a huge number of values? For example, 1 million days. Let's write and see the effects. Let's close this and run again. As you can see, it worked for a long time and returned the result. But we know that normally SQL Developer returns the first 50 rows. But the function completed the entire collection and then sent it to us. We can see that better if we scroll down the results. As you can see, the second value does not change so much, because it fetched the next values from the memory. It's already fetched from the database, so the execution time does not change so much. However, sometimes it will be enough to get the first n values, or sometimes you may have some memory problems. To avoid these problems, we use the pipeline table functions. As I pointed before, instead of completing the whole collection, pipeline functions return each row as soon as it is prepared. Pipeline function creation is a bit different than the regular table functions. Now let's copy the create code of the regular table function, paste it into a new worksheet, and talk while creating the pipeline one. The first thing that we need to do is writing pipeline keyword on the function declaration. This keyword will show that this function will push each row as soon as it is created, and the next rows will be piped to one before. So let's change the name first, and then write our pipeline keyword. As you can see, we write it before the is or as keyword. Great. One important thing in pipeline table functions is we don't return any nested table or something. We simply return the object. So no need to initialize any nested table or something. So then let's simply comment that line. Since we don't have any nested table, we don't extend it. And we don't assign any value. So what do we do then? We simply pipe our rows to each other with using the pipe row operator. We write pipe row, and inside parentheses we write our object. As you can see, we simply type pipe row and take our object inside of the parentheses. With this way, the function will continue returning rows until our loop finishes. Now, there is one more difference. Since our function pushes each row without waiting to complete all the rows, there is no need to return something. Actually, it will have returned all the rows before it comes to the line of the return keyword. So we won't return anything. However, since this is a function, we need to have a return keyword. Oracle developers decided to type return keyword anyway, but return nothing for this issue. We simply write return, and that's all. As you can see, we type on the return keyword but did not return anything. Now it's time to create our function. Perfect. Our function is ready. Now it's time to query that within an SQL statement. Now let's turn back to our select statement and modify it. fgetDates part. As you can see, the usage is all the same, no difference. So let's run it then. Perfect. It returned in almost 0 seconds. The regular table function returned in a couple seconds, but this returned in less than 1 second. So why? The reason is it has returned only the first n rows since SQL Developer asked for only some of the rows, maybe 200, etc. Now let's scroll down the results and see what happens. But by checking the seconds area. As you can see, the second has changed. Let's continue scrolling with the scroll bar in the right so we can scroll faster. As you can see, the execution time continues increasing. The reason is our function returns values only when I want to get it and partially. So the SQL Developer gets the data by a specific number of rows, then shows us that. Then if you scroll down, it gets the next n rows. But do not confuse. Our function returns that one by one. But SQL Developer gathers the first n and then shows it. So the second area continues increasing. Alright, now we can see the difference better. Since the pipeline function returns one by one, it returned faster in SQL Developer. But what if I order the rows? To order the rows, the function must evaluate all the rows in both function types. So if I order one row in descending order, what happens then? Let's see it. Let's start with checking the second of the regular table function. Let me copy that and paste in here and write fgetDays and run it. As you can see, it returned in 2.38 seconds. So let's order it then. I simply write order by one descending. As you can see, it is 2.83 seconds. A little slower, but not so much than the unordered one. So now let's test the pipeline function then. We know that it returns the unordered result in almost 0 seconds. So let's run the ordered one directly. Let me copy that and paste in here and run it. As you can see, it returned the result in 1.13 seconds. So it is pretty slow than the unordered pipeline function result, but it is still much faster than the regular table functions. Great. Now we saw that we can query from table functions just like a standard table. We have two types of table functions: regular table functions and pipeline table functions. Regular table functions fill a nested table or a V-array and return it after completing the entire collection. But pipeline table functions push each row at a time. So they are faster than the regular table functions. So if you need to use a function that returns a collection of data as a table, you can use the table functions. Alright, so this is the end of this lecture. See you in the next lectures.